I did a lot of thinking lately, and I kind of had to take a break from a lot of what had been going on, and I realized at the end of the day that with grieving from Alex, that, he and I aren't really in the same place, and that I may have known what mattered the most because I almost died and I came back to life, but he didn't. And the parts of me that were human, you may ask, why do I care? I was asked by his ex when I let out some of my thoughts, well, why did I care? Well, at the end of the day, a part of me felt disappointed and betrayed by him. And a part of me felt disappointed that I couldn't help him, and I saw him as someone I loved, and I saw him doing pointless things that, at the end of the day doesn't really matter. And if I could tell him anything, and from what I've learned, is that time is a very limited thing. And considering we're going through a pandemic and a lot of tensions that are happening currently, I'd say that that time should be spent with your loved ones and your family members, and you should ultimately tell the people you love how you feel before they end up leaving. And even if they do leave, you should get the word out there somewhere. And when I almost died, I realized that my biggest regret, or one of them, was never really telling Alex how I felt. And I'm glad I didn't die, but even if he was a jerk, and I've been getting comments and messages, talking about how great of a jerk he was and how big of a jerk he is. And I mean, it's valid and it's true, but at the end of the day, he was someone I loved. And I believe that if, you know, I did things that were bad, everyone has at least done something before, but it doesn't change the fact that you can redeem yourself. It just means that you have to try. It doesn't mean that it's an invitation back into my life, but it just means that as a person, I hope that he heals, and I hope that he finds what he's looking for, and I hope someday he realizes what matters at the end of it all. And if there was a chance of having a conversation with him, the only time I'd be available and the only time I'd be willing to have it is if he truly figures out what matters the most. You know, we're taught with American values and with values of property, with people like the Kardashians being role models, that materialism matters, but really, truly, the Kardashians are empty as people. And if you watch their TV show, which I had the displeasure of seeing parts of it because my cousin liked it, it's just really empty. And they're really shallow, and, they live this faux glamorous life. And a lot of their problems are aired out. It's, bad. And when I think of Alex, I do believe that he could find, you know, peace and love within himself. I'm not necessarily saying that I was the path to that, or maybe I didn't really matter in his life. And I was angry for a long time because of how much he mattered to me and how less I seem to matter to him. Because even if you do say you care about someone, it's shown in your actions and as to what you do. It's shown as to what you it's shown as to what you show them. Because he could believe that he cares about me, but the fact that he didn't take time out of his day to ask me, hey, how I was doing, when I had this whole entire, how do I word it? When I had this whole entire downfall and when I almost died, and he didn't even bother to return or answer my calls, or, he didn't bother doing any of those things. And he could lie to himself and say that, hey, I am a mean person and I have expectations that are unrealistic, but at the end of the day, all I expected from him was to show me that he cared about me. Cards and whatever other people are saying, that doesn't show me that he truly cares about me. I am a person of logic, reasoning, and I am someone who looks for action and empirical proof. And I mean, he could say that, he feels fear. I mean, I believe that. I felt fear. The fact that I never told him how I felt, the good, the bad, the middle of it, the needing to assess myself, all of it, it shows that, I felt fear. But the fact that I almost died, that gave me even more fear. But then it made me humble up myself and realize that, I wanted to let the man I loved know that, hey, I loved him, and I wanted to spend whatever last moments of my life on this earth trying to help him. If I died, at least he could rise and move up, and he could use my life to rise and to move up. And for a while I thought that maybe this could be a part of my life journey and of my life purpose. And it's hard admitting to that to myself and accepting that vulnerability, and then realizing that, well, I didn't die, and then actually doing the work I had to do to myself to figure out, well, how do I function in society again, and how do I figure out, what would make me live? I mean, at the end of the day, I can't control if Alex is a jerk or not. At the end of the day, people can say, oh, he does sound like a jerk, but at the end of the day, there was a point in time where I did love him, and a part of me, as a human, still loves and cares about him enough to where I'd want him to heal from whatever trauma that there is. And I'd want him to have the courage that I had to do what I did. I mean, it may have looked crazy, and a lot of people found it obsessive, crazy, and thought it was weird. But at the end of the day, I still held on to my faith, and I didn't really care what those people said, because you know what? Life is too short to care about images. To some people, you are the villain in their story. To others, you are a hero. And to others, you're just someone who never really existed. Life is made up of nuances and of moments. It's not like a book where you're this one set character. It's like a multitude of books. And even Joe may have been a friend or a hero to someone in his life, even though he was a villain in my story. It doesn't mean that he can't change from his ways and be a hero in someone else's story. That doesn't mean he has the right to come back into my life, and I don't want that. It just means that there's a potential to do good, and that people make mistakes, and sometimes it's best not reopening those wounds. I mean, I've been the villain in a lot of people's story, more than I'd like to admit. And I have apologized and I have learned from my mistakes. And at the end of the day, I realized that I did have controlling issues where I am a bit of a control freak. But I realized after limiting myself to Facebook on my PC and uninstalling it from my phone that, you know what, you can't win over people. Sometimes they just have, made up their mind, and you can't really do anything to change it. I had to realize this with one of my friends, and all I could do is just walk away, hope for the best, but ultimately work on my own path and work on what I'm trying to do. Because at the end of the day, people can snicker, they can sneer, but they don't really control what you do, what you find, and sometimes the people who are told that they are crazy, they tend to ignore what they're told and continue with their research, and when they find something breathtaking, they end up being someone that's renowned and is seen as one of the greatest researchers of all time. This had happened to someone like Galileo. I mean, he was locked up in a tower by the papacy, but he was proven right and is now someone who is renowned. And that's how I see it when it comes to people, ridicule, and judgmentalness. Because at the end of the day, I could say something about Alex. People could say that, Alex is a jerk, and, with his past actions, it's validated. But Alex has the choice to whether or not to stay a jerk or to change into something else. I don't control that. I control what I do. And I would say at this time, I don't think that he and I are ready to really talk yet, because he still feels all that fear, and I may have been more brave processing my emotions, but knowing him, he probably feels as if he's consumed by all that guilt. And a part of me does feel sorry for him, but at the end of the day, he needs to figure out his own path and as to how to get out of that fear, and maybe I could help one last time, because I don't want Alex turning me into something I'm not. And I don't want the pure intent of my love to be corrupted because of how angry I was at the person that he was to me. If you're gonna ask why I loved him, to be honest, I don't really know. It's illogical, but at the end of the day, I had to learn how to unconditionally love him, even if he was this jerk. I mean, I know he's a jerk. But as an adult and as a grown woman, I can choose what I do with that love, and I choose to hope that he heals, but that he does it without me, and I'm not going to let him get in the way of what I'm searching for. So, with Sheba, maybe she was the consort or wife of King Solomon when she used riddles to question his wisdom and to test it, and he answered all of her riddles correctly, and because she always challenged him, that was why King Solomon married her. I guess in his life, I am his Sheba. We're not getting married, though. Getting that straight. But as Sheba, I believe that he's meant to question everything that had gone through his life and where he came from. Are these really his root values, and do these things that he keeps within himself, does it serve him now? I know that he is someone who has his ideals, and I know that he is someone who comes from a place of where he was taught to have his values. And as much as ideals and values are great, you have to also look at the impact of something, and you also have to look at the reality of the situation. A lot of the villains within our story, they think that they're doing something that is just, and they think that they're doing something that is necessary for that goal, and their intent may have been just at one point, but they end up becoming the villain because they become the monster that they're fighting against, and they become the tyranny that they are against. He may have wonderful ideals, and it was a part of why I did fall in love with him. But he has to look as to what those ideals became and how it became corrupted, and he has to look within himself and ask himself, are what these people doing, or are what those people around me are doing, is this really me, and is this really what I stand for? Because at the end of the day, there are groups that do have sex, and there are radicals that are part of a group. And there's a reason why I had excommunicated myself exclusively to a lot of groups. I have excommunicated myself against the LGBTQ. I have excommunicated myself from the college Republicans and from, the Conservative Party. I have excommunicated myself from my original church or my original religion of Christianity. I have excommunicated myself from the magical community, and I have excommunicated myself from a lot of things. And I have even I had even became an antagonist in my mom's story because it didn't fit with who I was as a person and my ideals. I realized that the things that I identified as and the things that I used to partake in, if I continued to identify as part of those communities and or associate myself with people who go against my core values, I realized myself that I would be seen as enabling that and being in agreement to that, and that was why I left. I didn't wish anything ill upon those people, and at the end of the day, I can't control those people. There are people who are good within the LGBTQ plus community, but those people aren't speaking out against the radicals that have taken that community and had made it an emotional fuckfest. Same along with rational conservatives and very emotional, erratic social conservatives that tended to hijack the movement. And then with Bors. Bors was the common, everyday man that had found the Grail. In fact, he does remind me of Alex in some ways. Alex is someone that would stand for his ideals, and he wouldn't be persuaded by things otherwise. When Bors was on his mission to find the Grail, he was tempted by women who threatened to kill themselves if he did not bed them or sleep with them. Bors rejected them, and he didn't really care that they killed themselves, because at the end of the day, he was there to serve his king, and he was there to find the Grail. I could see that things may be tempting within Alex's life. Maybe positions, maybe love from someone, or approval from someone, because he made a decision that they may have liked, but that he himself didn't like, as in his person. A part of me feels as if he's trying to fight against what he was taught, and a part of me feels as if he's trying to fight against what he himself already knows deep down. At the end of the day, your gut feeling is always right. And if you don't follow your gut, you end up enabling people into going into oblivion. Sometimes you have to be the antagonist in someone else's story, and, sometimes you have to handle them yelling at you and maybe even hating you just for a little bit, and it hurts at first, but sometimes you have to do it for the best of that person. And they could yell at you, they could hate you, but at the end of the day, if you're right, and they'll if you're right, they'll end up hopefully realizing that you're right at the end of it. Or if they don't realize that you were right, you could just love from a distance and realize that if that person can't handle you disagreeing with them, or your ideals and their ideals not matching up, this person isn't ultimately someone you would want in your life. And this reminds me a lot of the relationships that I've had. I've had relationships where I had to choose between my ideals as a person, what I stood for, or if I wanted to, shield how I felt and pretend to stand for what they stand for and pretend to agree with them. At the end of the day, if I feel like they're wrong, I'm going to say that they're wrong, and if they react, well, that's on them. Because civil adults can disagree with one another. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with someone. It matters if there's that civility there, and if you show that person that you're there for them and that you love them no matter what. If someone can't handle me disagreeing with them, I ultimately just leave. It hurts, but I have to stand up for who I am as a person. And then with the Five of Swords, things, may look bad now. Things may look bad if you stand up against the crowd and if you end up being a leader. I mean, I've dealt with that. I mean, I've been attacked, brought down, and I've had a lot of people lash out at me and yell unintelligible things to me, and I understood where they were coming from. But at the end of the day, I don't have time to engage in that. With the Five of Swords, it shows a conflict there. Maybe you would want to fit in with something. Maybe you don't want to disappoint someone. Or maybe if you disappoint someone, you disappoint the other person, and it's kind of like vice versa. If you disappoint one person, you would gain the approval of the other person. But if you disappoint that other person, you would gain the approval of that other person. At the end of the day, the approval of those people don't really matter. What matters is how you truly feel as a person and if you understand where both are coming from. And you have to open up your voice and you have to tell them what you mean, even if it does come out on anger. You have to accept those emotions and you have to process fully as to how you feel. And if either side doesn't accept you for who you are and for how you feel, you know, then you don't really need to talk to those people. You don't have to 100% agree with what either side is saying, but you do have to stand up for what you believe in. You have to show others what you believe in and set an example to follow. Maybe within that disagreement and maybe within that anger and that argument that you may have with one person or the other person, they see something different. And that's why I'm okay with having arguments and I'm okay with having conversations. I'm not okay with talking to someone who ultimately had made up their mind and who isn't open to learning a new perspective. I'm not open to talking to those people. I'm open to talking to people who are interested in learning other viewpoints even if they disagree with them. I go out of my way to understand every side within an argument so that I could articulate it, role play if I have to, play devil's advocate, and so that I can have a better nuanced point of view. But at the end of the day, I'm someone who would stand up for what I believe in. And there's rarely anyone who I actually tell what I believe in, because truthfully, a part of me feels as if one person isn't really willing to hear me out, I don't feel as if they've earned the right to the knowledge of, hey, what do I believe in and what do I stand for? I'll admit that a lot of my posts have been devil's advocate, and a lot of them, I'm not going to try to discredit myself. There's truth to it, but it's not the entire truth. I only post what I want Alex to know. I don't really post, 100% of the truth and 100% of what I feel. I post as to what I want him to know and the gist of it. And then you have the Ten of Lances. The Ten of Lances, I can see him, the moment he actually stands up for himself and the moment he actually is himself, I can see people actually respecting him and loving him for who he is. I mean, it may be hard at first. I mean, it was hard for me at first. I mean, I was raised in a conservative household where girls can't smoke, drink, or have tattoos. Turns out I do all three. But my parents realized that they, raised me ever since I was little into the adult that I am now, and they love me for who I am, and they want me to be happy. I'm saying that with the Ten of Lances, regardless of what Alex and I disagree on, at the end of the day, from the love in my heart, I would hope that he finds his way, and I would hope that he ends up realizing that a lot of the things that he thought meant something, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And I hope he realizes that it's the love in your heart and the love you have for your friends, your family, your pets, just the little things that matter. I hope that he ends up realizing that at the end of the day, and that what matters is that you go after what you want